Hey everyone, and welcome. So today we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating ways we have to understand people, just watching them. It's a research method called field observation, and it's really all about the art of seeing human behavior happen in real time, in the wild.
You know, it's a huge question for any social scientist, right? If you really want to understand how society works, you can't just rely on what people say they do in a survey. You've got to see what people actually do in their everyday lives. So let's figure out how researchers pull this off.
Okay, so to make this super clear, let's create a little scenario. Let's imagine a social researcher, and we'll call her Dr. Anya Sharma. She's completely fascinated by all those unspoken rules that guide us when we're in public. Her lab for the day? A busy city park.
See, Dr. Sharma gets it. She knows if she just walks up with a clipboard and asks, hey, what are the rules for sharing a park bench? She's not going to get the real story. People either don't know how to put it into words, or they'll just act differently because she asked. For the real, authentic stuff, she needs to watch. And that presents her very first big decision. And that right there brings us to a huge decision for any observer. What's your role going to be? Are you going to try and blend in with the crowd? Or are you going to be a fly on the wall? This choice is absolutely critical because it completely changes the kind of information you're able to get.
Okay, so Dr. Sharma's got two basic paths she can take. She could be a participant observer, actually join a yoga class in the park or sit down with a group having a picnic, or she could be a non-participant observer, just sitting on a bench and watching from a distance. Since her goal is to see what people do when they're not being influenced, she goes with non-participant. She's going to be an outsider looking in.
Now let's say Dr. Sharma wanted to go even deeper, like really deep. She could do what's called ethnographic research. This is the most intense version of participant observation. We're talking about researchers who might live with a community for months or even years to truly understand their culture from the inside out. It's like becoming a temporary member of the club just to see what makes it tick.
All right, so Dr. Sharma's picked her spot on the bench. Now what? I mean, she can't just write down people are walking around, right? She needs a system. And researchers are trained to look for 4 specific channels of human behavior.
This is where the pros have a system. They basically break down everything they see into these 4 main channels. Think of them like different camera lenses. Each one gives you a different layer of information and helps you decode all the silent conversations that are happening all the time.
First up, you've got physical signs. Super straightforward, but really powerful. Dr. Sharma might notice a man in a crisp business suit talking on his phone, and then see a group of teenagers with band t-shirts and ripped jeans. Before a single word is spoken, their appearance is already telling a story about who they are.
Okay, next channel, kinesics. That's just a fancy word for body language. She sees a couple leaning in towards each other, totally relaxed. Then, just a few feet away, a person is sitting bolt upright, arms crossed, staring at their phone with a frown. Those nonverbal cues are shouting information about their emotional state.
Number 3 is something we all feel instinctively. Proxemics. It's all about personal space. Researchers have mapped this out into different zones: intimate, personal, social, and public. Dr. Sharma can see it in action. A group of friends stands in a tight personal circle, but when 2 strangers pass on the path, they keep a much wider social distance. It's a constant, silent negotiation.
And last but not least, she's listening. But it's not just about what people are saying, it's how they're saying it. Researchers call this paralanguage. She hears the sharp clipped tone of an argument from one direction, and then the warm, gentle laughter from a family nearby. The music behind the words often tells you more than the words themselves.
But here's the thing. Just as Dr. Sharma is in the zone, scribbling away in her notebook, she hits the biggest snag in this whole field of research. It's called the observer effect. It's that moment when she's no longer invisible. So imagine this. Someone from a group she's been watching gets curious, walks over, and asks that very question. Boom! Just like that, the game has changed. The natural, spontaneous behavior she was seeing could instantly turn into a performance because now they know they're being watched, and that's called reactivity. And this is such a critical concept to grasp. When observation is reactive, people know they're under a microscope, and that can totally skew the results. Dr. Sharma was aiming for non-reactive observation, trying to be unobtrusive. But once she's been spotted, the authenticity of everything she sees from that point on is, well, questionable. Okay, so after all this time in the park, Dr. Sharma heads back to her office with a mountain of field notes. But the work's not over. Now she has to sift through it all, analyze her data, and just as important, she has to think about the strengths
and the weaknesses of the method she just used.
So why go through all this trouble? What's the big win here? Well, it's simple, really. Observation lets researchers see what people actually do, not what they say they do on a questionnaire. It gets you past the official story people tell and shows you what's really happening on the ground, with all its beautiful, messy nuance. Of course, it's not all perfect data. There's some real limitations. For one, Dr. Sharma's findings are really just about this park on this day. She can't say her conclusions apply to every park in the world. It's a detailed snapshot, not the whole album. Not to mention, it's incredibly time-consuming, and it's really hard for another scientist to replicate her study exactly.
So let's wrap this up by turning the camera around, so to speak. If a researcher like Dr. Sharma followed you for a day, just silently observing, what would your behavior reveal? Think about your clothes, your posture, how close you stand to people, the tone of your voice. What story would a silent observer piece together about you?